Hello, welcome to An Imperfectly Perfect Life with me, Shari Leid. Today, my guest is Tiran Jackson, and he has an incredible story that I'm not going to give you a lot of background because it's most impactful when you hear it from him because it's a very personal story. The big takeaway for me was that resilience is something that we can build, we can make stronger. And he goes around the country teaching this. He's a professional speaker, he's an author, motivator, coach, entrepreneur. And I also am proud to say he's one of my friends. I met him a year ago at the National Speakers Association. I was so lucky to sit with him during lunch and hear his story for the first time there a year ago. And it's a story that has changed my life. And I think about often. And I'm pretty sure it'll change your life too. Okay, let's dive in. Hey, Tyran, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Sherry. It's great to be here. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I've been following your career since I met you at the NSA conference, following you on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. You are everywhere.
Hey, that's a good thing. I'm glad. My marketing is working. So if you see me popping up, that's a good thing.
Your marketing's on point, and you talk about resilience.
Yeah.
And before I got on this Zoom call with you, I was thinking, okay, what's resilience and what does it mean to me? And when I think of resilience, I think of a bounce back. But when I think of you, I think of a bounce forward.
Yeah.
What is your definition of resilience?
So my definition of resilience is the ability to cope with, come to terms with, and really deal with the breakdowns and challenges that occur in our life. That adversity, and use that adversity as a catalyst to create positive growth in ourselves. So when you say bouncing back, I do think that there is an element of just being able to get up off the ground and bounce back. But I also want to emphasize the fact that we should use the lessons that we learn through that process in order to become better versions of ourselves. So elevate to a higher level as a result of what you've gone through.
And you became an expert in resilience through actually living it.
Yes.
Can you
Yep.
describe? I know you've talked about your story, but man, your story I've heard it several times. I've repeated your story the best I could. I mean, I don't know if I added stuff in or took stuff out, but I could listen to your story over and over again and get something out of it. Can you give us your
Yep.
story?
By all means, by all means. So Sherry, I was an engineer for 20 years before life happened to me. I want to take you back to 2018. My wife Malika and I, we were getting ready to celebrate our 15th wedding anniversary. And right before this, we were both very, very busy. She had just gotten promoted as a director in HR for a Fortune 500 company. I was an engineering manager where I was traveling all over the country. So it would seem like for a period of time, she would be gone for 1 week, and I would be at home with our son Cameron for that period of time. And then when she come back, I would leave for a week. So it was a lot going on right before. And so we were really looking forward to this time for our 15th anniversary to go on vacation, spend some time together, reconnect, block everything else out, and just enjoy one another.
Mm.
We decided we would take a trip to the Bahamas and spend 5 days at an all-inclusive resort. And the day before that, I dropped our son Cameron off with his aunt and uncle and told him, "Don't worry, son. I'll be back in 1 week to pick you up." And he was excited.
Where were you guys living at that
So we
time?
were living in Atlanta, Georgia at the
Mm.
time. And Atlanta's home to me. That's
Mhm.
been we've been here for quite a time, about 10 years before this trip was coming up. And so we were in and dropped our son off in Nashville, Tennessee. 3 hour
Mm.
drive or whatnot, but that's where a lot of my family was from, as well as her brother. And that's who we dropped our son off with her brother and sister-in-law. And as I said, told him, "Don't worry, we'll be back in a week to pick you up." It was summertime, so we were going to go on another trip with him before school started back up. So we were starting making plans. But he was excited about us having this time together and being
Mm.
able to enjoy being away. We leave the next day to go to the Bahamas, and the first 2 days are great. We had time at the beach, fruity drinks, time at the pool. We take pictures, all the great things that you do when you're on
Mhm.
vacation. And one of the things that she had highlighted was she wanted to go swimming with the pigs, which is one of the attractions as far as
I
this
heard of
island in the
that.
Bahamas. Yep. And it's funny because the year before she went on a girls' trip in Mexico and she got in the water and took some pictures with the dolphin. And she thought this was the coolest thing. So she wanted to get this picture with these feral pigs that you can swim with to go to the photo collection. And I was like, okay, I like bacon, I like ham, but all of these things. But if that's what you want to do, that's what we'll do. So on the third day of our trip, we actually planned to leave the resort and go on an excursion to be able to see the island, but to get these pictures as well, and to get that adventurous moment as part of our trip. We get picked up by a bus from our resort, go to the marina, and we get to the marina, and as we're there, we have a decision to make. Do we want to do a half day tour or do a full day tour? Now, both options cover getting the pictures with the pigs, so it wasn't as if one of those discounted the other. But Malika and I talked about it, and I was thinking about how much time we had left, and I wanted to go golfing at the resort that afternoon. So I said, okay, how about we do the half day trip? And she was fine with it. She said she'll go to the spa. We wanted to fit a couple things else in from the resort. So we bought our tickets, boarded our boat, and we took off at 9 o'clock in the morning. As we
Was
took
that two
off,
different boats then that you're
there,
choosing from
there
between the
were
half
two
day?
different
Whoops.
boats. Yes, there were
Sorry,
two
I did
different
a
boats.
saw it and all the emoji stuff popped up. But so the half day boat was different than the full day, which one you were going to
Right,
board.
right,
Okay.
right. So we got on the board of our boat, took our seats, took off, and I was thinking to myself, this is great. I'm having a time of my life with the woman that I love. Weather's perfect. And this was going to be a fun, adventurous part of our trip. Little did I know that that trip would change life forever. Unbeknownst to us, we were sitting right above a fuel tank, and there
Mm.
was a fuel leak that was emanating from this fuel tank. 5 minutes of the ride, something caused a spark. The next thing you know, the boat exploded.
Wow.
I
Did you have
found
any
myself,
warning? Did they say anything? Did they know that this
there
was
was
happening?
no warning, no indication whatsoever. We were sitting in our seats, everything was fine, and then all of a sudden, we didn't see this coming, and I found myself waking up face down on the surface of this burning boat. I'm waking up because my right leg is literally on fire. I glanced down and I could see my left foot severed. I could see my ankle bone. I could see blood rushing
Mm.
out. And as I'm starting to come to, I can see the second boat that took off around the same time that we did. They weren't too far away, and passengers on that boat were yelling, "Get off the boat, get off the boat, get off the boat." At this point, I'm completely shocked, surprised, and I don't know what's going on. But I try to push myself up, but I crumble. Try to push myself up. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but I had my collarbone broken in 4 places. On top of that, I had a broken right foot, third-degree burns on my right leg, a fractured pelvis, fractured vertebrae, bruised ribs.
Wow.
And as I said, my left foot was severed, blood gushing out. The only thing that I could do to get myself away from the flames was put my right hand forward, put my fingertips in the ridges on the surface of the boat, and just drag myself away from the flames. And I get about 4 or 5 feet away until I pass out again. Now, there were a lot of things that were going on. Malika was actually thrown, her and one other passenger, off of the boat in a different direction, and they were in the ocean. They were in the
Mm.
water. Now, the water was still fairly shallow where we were. And the second boat that took off the same time that we did, passengers from that boat actually swam over to help pull me off the edge of the boat and get me onto their boat. I'm very grateful that they did because 3 minutes after they got me off, the second fuel tank on the boat exploded. I wouldn't be here today.
Wow.
There happened to be a third boat in the area that picked up Malika and this one other passenger, and they got them to shore, got them on an ambulance, got them to a clinic. As far as myself, when they got me to shore, now keep this in mind, we're in the bumpy back roads of the Bahamas. There's not a lot of
Mm.
medical facilities. They got one clinic with one doctor. Um, Somebody on a pickup truck, they put me on a piece of plywood to take me to this clinic.
Wow. Were
So
you
I'm in.
conscious at this point?
I was in and out of consciousness. Now, I went in and out of consciousness 5 different times between the time of the explosion and the time they get me to the clinic. But I'm alert enough to realize what's going on. And I'm thinking to myself and praying that my wife is okay. They get me to this clinic, and as they put me on the stretcher and wheel me in, that's when I hear Malika. I hear her moans. I hear her agony. I hear her suffering. I can't do anything about it. They get me set up in a bay, and I'm trying to listen for Malika and hoping
Mm,
that she's okay. And I hear the noise start to die down, but it's chaotic. Okay, I can't figure out everything that's going on. When the one doctor finally gets to me, I ask him, "How is my wife?" And what he tells me is that they were sending me and this other passenger to the good hospital, and then my wife would come later. So even though I
mm.
don't hear Malika, I'm thinking that she must be doing better than I am because they're gonna urgently put me on an airplane to fly me to Nassau to the good hospital. But I'm optimistic because I'm thinking that she's coming later on that day and I get to see her again. They get me to the hospital. I go through emergency surgery. They try to pin what's left of my left foot back to my leg.
Wow.
Insert.
When you say they, are you still, wait, where are you at the
I'm in the
hospital or?
hospital now.
Okay.
I'm in
Okay.
the good hospital in the
Okay.
Bahamas. They run me through a CAT scan, figure out all the stuff that's wrong with me, and said the first thing they need to do is try to reattach my foot to my leg. So I wake up in ICU 6 hours after this incident started, but I wake up thinking and hoping I'm going to see Malika now. She should be at this hospital by now. When I'm finally starting to come to, the nurse leaves out of the room I'm in, goes get the doctors that come in, and I ask them, "Where's my wife? Where's Malika?" And they look at each other, a little puzzled and confused. They leave the room
Mm.
and come back in a couple minutes later. And as they come in, they tell me, "Mr. Jackson, we hate to inform you, but your wife didn't make it." Now, I'm
Wow.
thinking that she hasn't made it there yet
Oh,
initially, and that there must have been a problem with the airplane that flew us there that needed to get her, but they told me no, that she died at the clinic. And they didn't want to tell me that before they sent me to the hospital. So here I
this
am,
is
Sherry.
just so much. I just can't, I can't even process it not being you. I mean, that's so much.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I cried myself to sleep that night, and I was thinking that this just has to be a bad nightmare. I'm gonna wake up the next morning and it's gonna be everything is normal. But no, I wake up in that hospital bed still, they're still broken physically, and realize that I've got to do things that I didn't want to have to do, but knew I had to do. That 12-year-old boy that I left in Tennessee, I had to call him on the phone and tell him over the phone, "Your mom's never coming home again."
Mm.
Tell him about the accident that we were in and try to reassure him that I was going to be all right and that we were going to get through it. And to have to tell your child that they're the only woman he's ever really been close to is no longer going to be there was one of the hardest things
I
I
can't
had.
even imagine telling just anybody that, let alone my own child.
Right. And so I was distraught, I was hurt, I was frustrated, I was mad at God. I didn't understand why this had to happen to us. And all of these emotions going through me. And it got worse because later that afternoon, my health was starting to get even worse overall. They tried to reattach my foot to my leg where my foot had gotten infected and infection started going through my body and my
Mm.
organs were starting to shut down. So I could see a EKG monitor over my head and I saw my vital signs go from green to yellow to red. And at that point in
Wow.
time, I started to give up. I was accepting the fact that Malika was gone, that I had broken my son's heart by telling him that his mom is gone, and now I'm about to be gone as well. They stopped bringing doctors in and
Mm.
started just bringing priests in to pray over me. And so
Wow. You
when
remember
you,
this?
I remember this. I remember this vividly.
Mm.
That they stopped trying to treat the infection and they were just giving me tramadol so I'd have a less painful death.
Mm.
Now, imagine yourself in that situation where they're giving up on you. And if these are the people who are going to help you survive, then, what hope do you have? But there were a lot of things going on in the background. And by a lot of things that were happening, my sister and my mom were contacted. They made their way down to the Bahamas. They
Mm.
started working behind the scenes to see what they could do to get me some more help. Because when they got to that hospital, they could see that there was no way that they were going to be able to care for me.
Mm.
And so amazingly, I woke up the next morning, my vital signs still yellow and red. But the next thing I know, I'm getting confiscated from the hospital. a level one trauma center in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, saw what happened. They heard that I lost my wife. They heard that that I was still alive, and they offered to bring me in to see if they could save
Mm.
my life. And so the next thing I know, a
Wow.
couple hours later, I am in surgery at Broward North in Florida, and they had to amputate my left leg for me to survive.
Did you know going into surgery that your leg was going to be amputated?
I didn't know that for sure, but I figured that there was going to have to be something done of that nature because they had determined in the Bahamas that the infection was spreading and that my foot was not responding to being basically pinned back together to my leg. So, but still, though, hearing that and knowing that and actually having it done, different things.
Oh,
And
I
so
bet.
I wake up out of surgery and to realize that half of my leg is gone was, you know, at that point I just wanted to survive. And it didn't it hit me, but it didn't fully hit me. I was not in my right mind at this point, Sherry. So
I can
uh,
only imagine.
and so yeah, so I was going through that. The next a day later, I had to go through five different surgeries to start putting the other parts of me back together. They weren't as serious as the
Hmm.
infection with the leg, but it was after then, and I'm a spiritual person, that God started speaking to me clearly. And what He told me was that I had to accept the fact that it was Malika's time to come home, and the sooner that I did, the better off I would be. He told me that I was not going to go back to the life that I had, and my new normal was going to be completely different from the normal that I had. Said that I was not going to go back to being an engineer and that there was going to be a new path and it was going to be uncomfortable. It was going to be outside of what I was used to and that I needed to be obedient. He told me that he was keeping me here for a reason. And if he wanted to, he could have taken my life three different times. When the boat exploded, when my vital signs went from green to red, and when I went through five surgeries and I was still very unstable. All of those were times where I could have, been taken. But that was when he made it clear to me that there was a decision that I had to make, a conscious decision. I could either feel sorry for myself and struggle to survive, or I could choose to be resilient and learn to thrive in spite of what I've gone through. And that the obstacles that I've overcome just to still be alive are nothing compared to what I was going to have to face moving forward. So when we talk about resiliency, that was the
Yeah.
moment in which there was a mental, spiritual, and emotional shift in who Tiran Jackson was, even though I didn't know what was ahead. But I understood that I had to be resilient and keep fighting and keep going if I had any shot to have a life that I could actually enjoy and love again.
So how did you get that download? And because okay, check this out. I just got certified as a meditation level one teacher, right? I'm trying to be a little more quiet in my life. And one of the explanations of meditation was, when you pray, you talk to God. When you
Yeah.
meditate, you listen to God. And so we're learning these different techniques. And I would just, I don't like, I somewhat joke that I don't want to live this next experience to have something to talk about. I want to read about it.
Mhm.
I want to get this download. Like when you say that, because when you describe what this message was to you, you describe it as if you and I are having a conversation.
Yeah.
How 'cause so a lot we're walking around going, okay, God, tell me what to do. What am I supposed to do? And we don't feel that connection. What can you explain that a little more?
Yeah, I mean, and keep in mind my circumstances. I was in a hospital bed. I couldn't move at all. And all of this time I've been praying to God to tell me, why this had to happen to us and what am I going to do? And I was already um, feeling pessimistic of what the future would look like, even though it looked like I was still going to survive. And in the midst of it, in the quiet and still, he spoke to me. I heard the voice
Mm.
saying these things that if I wanted to, I could have taken your life three different times. And it's like, okay, all of these messages that were going to be so important for me to incorporate if I wanted to move forward. This was a time I definitely needed to listen. So in the stillness and in the quiet, I heard the voice tell me that if I wanted to have any real shot of life still, and that he wanted to use me for a greater reason. And now, up to this point, I thought my whole purpose in life was to be a good engineer and to provide for my family
Mhm.
and to just do that. That was where my gift was. That was where my skill set was. But to have something come that clearly, that message come that clearly to me while I'm laying there, just, on my deathbed or recovering, and understanding that there was still going to be a shot at life for me. That was a out of body type of moment or experience to be able to hear something as clearly, as succinctly, and as actionable as that.
That's amazing. And you wrote a book about your
Yeah.
experience. What is the title of your book?
So the title of the book is Choosing Resilience. All things work together for good. And that title comes from that moment where he said I had a conscious choice to make. Feel sorry for myself or choose to be resilient. And so that captures not only the story to that moment, but also what I've learned in the recovery aspect, where it gives sort of a framework on how we can choose to be more resilient every day with the challenges that pop up in our lives.
And what year did you publish that book? When did it launch?
So the book was published in 2022.
Okay.
And really the way that it all came about, I was in the hospital in Florida for about 3 weeks before they discharged me. And when it was time for me to leave, the initial thought was that I would go to another rehab facility to actually start to heal. Now, my right foot is in a cast, my left shoulder's in a sling, I'm in a back brace, and I'm missing half of my left leg. And so I'm pretty broken up and
Yeah.
all. Um, the attempts to try to get me to a rehab facility that was somewhere closer to my family's was I got denied. And all of these places said that they didn't want to take me because I only had one functional limb, which was my right
Mhm.
arm. And so the decision was made to actually live with my sister and brother-in-law until I started to heal physically before I could actually try to move forward with life. Now, during this time, I'm literally having to be pushed in a wheelchair everywhere
Mhm.
and struggling just to get myself out of bed. And so I had a lot of time to myself, and a lot of time to talk with my sister, talk with my mom, talk with those who were closest to me. But one of the biggest changes in me was that I actually took a lot of time writing my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, writing to Malika as if I could communicate to her, putting thoughts out there as to what the challenges in my life was going to look like. And that was the beginning of what choosing resilience became. And so that started the book process. It was actually written in 2020, but due to circumstances related to everything that happened, I couldn't publish it until 2022. So,
Well,
so
that's interesting because so much has happened.
yeah,
And when you say if you wrote it in 2020, in my head, you were still in shock in 2020,
yeah, yeah,
and especially with a young son. And, when you're parenting, you do for them
yeah.
and you move forward, you're resilient, but taking that time for yourself, would you, if, and you, I wouldn't be surprised if you're writing a book now, but you could tell me if you're doing that, would
Yeah.
that book be different today than it was in 2020 when it was published in 2022?
It definitely would. And however, I've got two other books that I'm working on to an extent right now that sort of continue on because my perspective at that point in time, 1 or 2 years out of loss, out of dealing with the grief, out of transition in life, is a lot different now. I've had
Mhm.
more life experiences as a result of incorporating that resilience. And, in honesty, I've gone through ups and downs, which has retested my resilience in different
Mhm.
ways. And so the continuation and deeper insight on the framework on what it really means to be able to build that resilience within ourselves is part of what the next two books will incorporate.
That's great. One of the things I say in the morning to myself is I give myself the permission to reinvent myself today,
Yeah.
meaning I give myself grace to, if something changes to grow, to change, to make different decisions. So, in this process, I imagine your identity has changed.
Yes,
I
it
mean,
has.
clearly from the accident, but as you go along and as you grow and as you grow in your career as a professional speaker, as an author, as a coach, working with people, your identity, what has been the change? Who are you today that you weren't yesterday? And do you
Yes.
see yourself as two different people, one
Oh,
before the tragedy and one now?
so my business is called Reborn Resilient. And that's because the day of that incident, that was the essentially the death of the Tiran Jackson 1.0 and the rebirth of Tiran Jackson, who I am today, a different, changed, transformed individual. And if it wasn't for resiliency, I wouldn't be here. So that's the meaning behind it. But yes, I am a completely different person, Sherry. In my journey to being restored, which is one aspect of building the resilience, the process of understanding that rest is necessary for healing to take place. And we have to go through that level of restoration in order to be able to process what we have to move forward. But in going through that, I had to do a lot of therapy, a lot of counseling, a lot of, processing the grief. And in doing so, oh, and then this other part of it too, I was 25 when Malika and I got married. When everything happened, I was 40 years old. When you lose someone and you're so used to being with that person, it's like you start to do the things y'all like to do. And so
Mm-hmm.
you lose sort of your identity in that. And then when they're taken away from you suddenly, you kind of in this lost place. The things that I like to do when we were together were not always the things that I was going to need to do in order to sustain myself moving forward. So, with that, I had to rediscover who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I really had to dive deep to peel the onion back and understand who I was at that stage in my life based on the circumstances that I was going to have to face moving forward. And it was one of the most revealing processes that I ever you could imagine because now I'm having to be honest with myself of certain truths that I didn't, may or not wanted to face. And so that led to me rediscovering my identity and
Mm-hmm.
figuring out where I'm headed and where my direction is going moving forward and what I needed to do in order to be the best version of myself moving forward. And so emotionally, empathetically, this overall perspective on life, all of those things are completely different than what it was before. And I think that we ideally we should all evolve in ways as we
Mm-hmm.
progress in life. But sometimes these life-altering traumatic situations can accelerate that change. Now, some people it can happen for the negative, but if you can use that in the positive, then it could become the impetus to allow us to be unlock areas in life that we may not have discovered. And
Absolutely.
and I
Yeah.
tell people, I'm not a speaker. I wasn't intending to
You
be
are a
speaking.
natural speaker, though. You are
Oh,
you're like
I'm not though, Sherry. That's the thing about it. That's the thing
but
about it.
especially
I
when you
did.
say you're an engineer, because I don't think of engineers as, as orators, as speakers, but you have a natural way of communicating with people. And it's not just your voice or what you say. You have a natural presence and ability to connect. So that I know that's why God picked you. I mean, he challenged you in a way to pick. I mean,
Yeah.
he could have just picked you like, here you go, as opposed to yelling at you and saying, this is
Yeah.
it. But so you, in your speeches, are you teaching resilience? So can resilience be learned?
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. I see resilience as essentially a muscle. And if we work out that muscle, then we can develop it. We can make it stronger. We can make it better. I do teach aspects of incorporating resilience strategies, not just in your personal day-to-day life, but also professionally, also in whatever it is that you may find yourself having to be involved with. In some ways, that's socially, and obviously, I had to fight from a physical standpoint to learn to walk again. You saw me, Sherry. You would never know that anything happened to me if I'm
Mm-mm,
wearing jeans or pants on.
not at
So,
all. Yeah.
it's one of those things. But the doctors told me that it's gonna take me 8 to 10 months before I'd walk with a prosthetic. and that I was probably going to always have an obvious limp as I moved. And I was walking after 3.5 months, running 5Ks after 6 months, and I had never ran before. So all of these, but part of that just goes into the the people that you surround yourself with, your ability to be adaptable and flexible, your optimistic viewpoint towards certain situations, and looking for what that lesson is and incorporating it so you don't make mistakes again, but also being able to use it to be smarter and to get that growth that's necessary in order to apply it in life. And all of these pieces uh, gave me small wins. And those small wins added to me getting confidence and the ability to do more than I could have imagined.
Well, now you're the president also the National Speakers Association
Yep.
in Georgia, right?
That's
Atlanta.
correct. That's correct. Yes, I
So
am.
not
So,
only you're a speaker, you're the president of the body that basically is the number one speaker association in the U.S.
yeah.
that
Yes,
we're
I am.
members of. So that's incredible. And I never thought of resilience as a muscle. Honestly, before talking to you, I was thinking, okay, you either have it or you don't. Like you either have drive or you don't. So listening to you and how you're able to talk about resilience, allowing people to recognize that they can have it also.
Mhm.
Because I'm sure if somebody gave you the story that you were going, what's going to happen to you, you'd be
I
like,
wouldn't have signed up for it. So,
yeah,
yeah.
and then coming from it in the way you have.
Mhm.
Um, that I've never thought of it as a muscle before. So that gives a lot of hope for people who think that there's no way they can handle something that's hard if they've been thrown curveballs that
Yeah.
seem insurmountable. So what do you do? How do people work with you?
Well, people can work with me. Well, I do coaching as well. And what I found in the midst of going through my journey, so even though like I said, originally I thought I was going to be an engineer, I started speaking. I got certified as a life coach. And so I really help those who are trying to, one, get past the grief recovery. So I work with a lot of widows and widowers, which makes sense because I was in that place having to figure out how to get back to life because that grief can really sit on you. But also for those who just generally need to build resiliency. So they may not have gone through any major setback, but when something does happen, they can't get it together or they struggle to
Mhm.
get it together. And so for those who are wanting everything to be perfect, but it's not always perfect, helping them be stronger when they face adversity in order to not let it derail the direction of their life. And so people work through me by first off visiting my site, learning about Reborn Resilient and some of my coaching programs that I use to help people get perspective on what the best next steps are for
Mhm.
them to be able to have the life that they desire. And
What's your
so
website?
the website is rebornresilient.com. Easiest way to find me. But also you can find me on the socials. I'm everywhere, Tiran Jackson or Tiran Jackson Official, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever. You'll be able to see more and connect with me through there. And there I drop some tips and some nuggets about how to be able to build that resilience within yourself, how to deal with life-altering situations, and really how to be able to surround yourself with the right people, with the right advice, and not just some of everybody that can pull you in a direction where they want you, but those that will feed
Mm.
you, nourish you, and help push you in the right direction to be able to overcome the obstacles and adversities that you face in life.
And then you also speak. How do people get a hold of you
Yes.
for speaking if
Yes.
they want you? Do you speak to corporations, conferences,
Yep.
all of
Same.
the above?
Same deal. If you go to my website, you can book a meeting with me. If you go to my any of my socials, send me a message, or there's on some of them a link where you can book a 20-minute discovery call. But I speak to basically I speak with companies and organizations who want to take their biggest setbacks and turn them to their greatest comebacks. And all of that comes through building resilience, navigating grief, and getting clarity and purpose to move forward, and that falls into the category of C-level suites. I do town halls for different organizations, speak to sales teams, speak to those in healthcare, speak to even NFL professional football teams. And so, for those who are going to face adversity, and so many people are going through
Yeah.
something,
Yeah,
being
no
able
kidding.
to reframe that in a perspective that you stop saying why me, you start saying what next.
Mhm.
And being able to use the really leverage the pain that you go through and drive it towards your purpose, then that's a good audience for me to be able to impact. And so, like you said, going to my LinkedIn or to my website is the quickest way to find out more about who I am, what I speak to, and the impact that I can make for any organization out there.
I have to tell you, like I said, you communicate and you speak. It's not just the way you talk. You're not just a regular speaker, because even simply talking to you, you're a special human being. And
Well,
I'm very
I'm I'm
go ahead.
honored to be with another special human being in yourself, Sherry. So I just want to point that out.
Thank you. And so thank you for taking the time to talk with me here. And I will probably see you in Austin at the
You
conference in Austin.
you will see me in Austin. I will be there. I will be there.
Okay. All right. Well, again, thanks so much and wishing you the best 2026. Can't wait for those other two books to come out and see what else you do on this journey.
Sounds great. Thank you,
All
Sherry,
right.
for letting me be a part. I greatly appreciate it.
Okay. Talk to you soon. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining me this week. There's still time to sign up for the Women's 3-Day Retreat. It's March 27th through the 29th in Dallas, Texas. And while I like to say most retreats take you away, you try to escape your life to go to a retreat, this one brings you home. It brings you home to yourself, your career, and your community. You will leave without carrying the stories that no longer serve you. You will leave with more confidence than when you walked in the door, and you will leave with an excitement of knowing what your next steps are and knowing who you are. Okay, take care. Have a good week. Bye.